faster. Living off borrowed time. The clock faster. Living off borrowed time. The clock tick 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 faster.
Welcome to the Living Off Borrowed Time podcast. I am your host, Patrique on RYM, the source of our only viewership and listenership because there's nothing to view on the YouTube channel. Joined as always by my co-host, Caleb, OptimalAudio on RYM. And speaking of RYM, we are beginning we've had RYM guests on before, and no disrespect to them, but we're starting our summer of RYM royalty with a guest I'm incredibly excited for, and somebody, if you're on RYM, needs no introduction. Epithalamion. Probably butchering the hell out of that. Lucy Frost, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thank you for that lavish introduction. That made my day. This podcast can only go downhill from here.
Well, I mean, it always pretty much can only go uphill from the introduction, actually, because generally it's part of the show. And this week we'll be discussing DJ, as befits the upcoming holiday, not Juneteenth, although my job did the most. I don't know if anybody else's job is doing horrible race-related, like, mea culpa shit. But
Yeah.
My boss looks like Hank Hill, and he explained to us what Juneteenth was yesterday. That was fun. So, but not that holiday. Screw Day is coming up, and ideally, if super producer Kittenpuke gets this out when he's supposed to, and we believe in him, you'll be listening to this on Screw Day. Robert L. Davis Jr., DJ Screw, the innovator of screw music, is the topic of our show today. And
one of the all-time legends in hip-hop and music, period, I think.
Yeah. And in honor of his tempos, this episode will be 7 hours long.
Our second longest episode behind the Outcast episode.
This episode will be, and this is very fitting for me because I just listened to the Pierre Bourne Deluxe album last night, where every tag had something to do with being lost in the sauce. So it was a direct callback to DJ Screw.
Well, one of the best things about Screw tapes are the ad-libs, and shout out to Pierre Bourne, who right now has the best ad-libs with the Trackmasters Inc. guy that I think he keeps trapped in the basement and brings out for every release. Him and DJ Smokey must, have, like, the hookup on that shit.
It's just 10 hours straight of, damn, son, where'd you find this?
Whichever one was the DJ Smokey, I think it was like Yoshi Jules Volume 1. It's like, protect DJ Smokey. Yoshi.
It's like it has like the little, like, it's the same girl that does the Maybach music, but it's like, protect Positive Squad or something like that.
But yeah, with Screw, I guess we're going to start talking about how we first got into Screw music, which is something that I did not initially appreciate, and I actually got into by accident. So, and if you read my reviews, I do tell the story in one or two of them, and then we'll get into our favorite Screw releases and maybe talk a little bit about his influence, because he's been a little influential, just a bit. So,
yeah, it's really crazy looking back on it. We'll get to it, but so much of certain scenes in hip hop have been affected by Screw, and the artists are open about it or not open about it, but we can see the influence even all these years later.
Well, even like music distribution too, the way and mixtape culture, a lot of it, like all of it comes from Screw, I feel like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you think about Houston in general, like would Texas even have like nearly as big of a scene in hip hop without Screw? Like, I mean, on a surface level, obviously, like, Paul Wall doesn't exist without Screw. Okay, like that's, but I mean, UGK, how big would they have gotten without Screw? Just look at Houston in general and the culture that kind of became to define the hip hop scene in the city, because the South was only looked at as like Atlanta for a while, and Memphis, I guess, but that was more underground. Houston became mainstream very quickly, and Screw was a big part in that.
Yeah, I mean, you hear, like, I've heard Houston referred to as Screwston, and there's the fact that, like, Screw had that whole, like, coalition of pals surrounding him, and they called themselves the Screwed Up Clique. So yeah, I mean, I would say they defined Houston rap pretty thoroughly.
And even now, I mean, you have Houston kind of having, or Texas having a continued resurgence today with, Travis Scott, Maxo Cream, etc.
I mean, Travis's sound owes a lot to Screw. Obviously, there's songs that homage, and so yeah. But sound-wise, well, as far as how you got into Screw music, I remember that it was just something that was like watered down, like as far as, I mean, just going way back into how I got into hip hop. Outkast was one of the first rap acts that I was really into, like, because I had the stereotypical, like, I like certain ones, like, I like Tribe, I like the Roots, etc., etc., and Outkast was one of them, but I had that East Coast bias against Southern hip-hop, but then once I started breaking into that a little bit, I started getting into Wayne, like, right before Wayne really broke out, and I was downloading Dedication 2 off Soulseek, but I downloaded the wrong version. I downloaded the chopped and screwed version. And I've done this a few times before, and I always just disregard. I'm like, God damn it, these dumb Southern people. Why do they like shit so slow? Southern people are so slow. I'm really smart. Let me go watch Bill Maher some more. I'm like, I'm really sophisticated. But then I accidentally listened to the last track on it, which was Georgia Bush. And something about the way the chopped and screwed version of the sample on that really fucking hit me. And the way it worked with Wayne's raps. And something about that just made me really appreciate what that style had to offer. And I stopped being a biased coastal dickhead about it. And I can't say that I went and sought out every single Screw tape, in fact, it took me a little while to actually get into Screw about this, because the second Chopped and Screwed album I really liked was years later, based on an Odema review. Speaking of RYM legends that are going to be on this podcast, shout out Odema, respond to your PMs. Is Waiting to Inhale by Devin the Dude.
Mm-hmm.
And these are not, the thing about these Chopped and Screwed albums too is once you've listened to Screw and then you listen to these, you realize these are like fine imitations, but they don't have the character of a Screw tape, because he had a real distinct way in how he put these things together, and the personality is not necessarily. The waiting to Inhale one actually has some of that personality, but that's a lot due to Devin being there and the way it's done. So the way it's they switch up the track list a little bit, and it kind of just feels like they were lazy and just let it record. Like they forgot to actually sequence it. It feels like it was more out of stone laziness than any sort of artistic decision, but it still works in favor of the album. But that's how I kind of came to it. And then eventually I heard 3 in the Morning and Big versus Pac, which I'll get to when we talk about the individual ones, was the one that really sold me on Screw, because I came to that from a Big fan's perspective, actually, and it made me appreciate Pac more. So, and I'll get to my more nuanced argument about how Screw makes you appreciate rappers that you might not have considered previously due to the way he plays with vocals when we get to that. But that's the short version of how I got into Screw music. So, Optimal, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I was going to say that I probably got into Screw via, I mean, it's, it's unfortunate, I guess, but just via internet forums, I thought you
were going to say it's because somebody died, and you said because.
Oh gosh. No, because, well, funny you brought up Outkast. I mean, I had loved Outkast before I was on forums and things of that nature, but a lot of the southern hip hop I got into was just via like, RYM, other forums, like just things that were like, oh, this is great, and I'm like, oh, I dove into the discography of X, Y, and Z artist, and I think after I did UGK, Screw was like, I don't know what it was, but I think it was just like in the hey, this artist appears on section, and it was like a shit ton of DJ Screw things, and I had known what Chopped and Screwed was. Obviously, I had listened to it before. I forget what context exactly, but I think I saw Big Time, and I was like, oh, this cover's really interesting, and this is cool. Like, I'll just listen to this. And then I think I got to like After I Die, which is one of my favorite songs on the one of my favorite songs just in general. And I was like, okay, what is this? Like, it was one of those like mind altering experiences that you can have with not that many, not that many albums or DJ mixes come along where you kind of have that changes how you look at a genre or changes how you like look at music. And it tends to be used in hyperbole these days, but Big Time Volume 2 definitely did that for me.
All right, cool. Lucy, how'd you get into Screw?
Being from Texas, I had been hearing about Screw for a long time before I ever listened to him. Like, I think I first heard about him right after he passed away. Like, of all things, I think NPR did like a little report on him. But the thing is, I didn't really understand. I didn't really know exactly who he was or what his thing was. Like, I just knew, there was this music that was related to rap, but it had a weird druggy thing. I mean, one of the first things I heard about, with regard to Screw music was like the fact that you listened to it while drinking tons of codeine, and not being much of a codeine fiend, I thought, well, I'm just not gonna get this music, or like I'm not gonna appreciate this. But I think the real reason why I started listening to DJ Screw, and this would have been like in 2009, I think, um, was because I am very unfocused in terms of exploring music. Like, I'm the opposite of you, Patrick. I could never really like devote myself to a musical scene. I was jumping all over the place, and um, it was very kind of impatient in terms of looking for change. And so consequently, I was a big fan of fucking around. And so when I, started thinking, well, DJ Screw, it's the slowed down rap with effects added, I thought, well, this will be a fine example of fucking around, and will keep me entertained for an evening. And Caleb, like you, I got Big Time, which, by the way, I love the full glory of its title, Big Time Records Volume 2, all screwed up. And I don't know, that kind of weird slapdash, unwieldy title was part of the appeal for me. The ridiculously and wonderfully psychedelic cover, which uh, which I instantly associated with Houston, by the way. I've been to Houston a few times, and it looks like something you would see in Houston, or like, that is somehow the aura of Houston. So I listened to the music, and where I knew I loved what I was hearing, and where I knew it was really changing something about my taste, was when I got to Inside Looking Out on All Screwed
Mm-hmm.
Up. Like, just something like that's where I really realized that something was going on that was more than fucking around. That was much bigger than that. Um and yeah, something about like what Screw could do to the human voice, what Screw could do to a sample. And I was sold.
I think it's interesting to say about the sample, because I appreciated that freshly because I was listening to what he did to Hard Knock Life, listening for this episode, because I hate Hard Knock Life. I fucking hate that song. I really like the screwed up version of Hard Knock Life. Like, I think he makes the sample haunting, what he does with it.
Yeah.
And I won't say he makes Jay-Z's verses interesting, because I don't think Jay-Z's verses on that song could ever be interesting, but they're at least tolerable, way more than on the original. But what he does with that beat is amazing. And what he does with the samples in general, and it's not just slowing them down, because I was also thinking about this in terms of compared to, like, we'll get to his, the Screw Children at the end of the episode, but, like, not even the people on YouTube who just go into Audacity and slow things down, but, like, people who make those screwed tapes, like I was talking about, like, he didn't just screw it down, he found a different character in these songs.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I always think of with Screw is that, sometimes people criticize Screw music because they think it's easy to make, or it's just a very basic formula that you kind of slather over whatever tunes you choose. But no, Screw has been imitated so many times, at least by amateurs, and he can do something that none of them can. Nothing sounds like DJ Screw. Even when it's, like, proficiently done. Like, even when somebody knows how to do the chopping right and, like, can loop parts and stuff like that, there is a personality, a thumbprint that Screw puts on his tapes that nobody else can manage.
You're saying that all of the little B tapes where it's like 50 chopped and screwed instrumentals don't sound like Screw?
I think Robert Earl Davis would have done something a little different with them, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
They look like some shit you get in, like, the grocery store line, 50 chopped and screwed beat tapes for 99 cents. But yeah, as to All Screwed Up, it's one of the best examples of him working with UGK, which is the most natural pairing in the entire world. I'm not familiar. It's basically them, Point Blank, and 20 to Life.
Yeah.
And PSK 13. So UGK is the main name on there. Bun's voice was born to sound this way. Like, the bass in his voice is just. There are a few rappers I'm going to talk about sound so much better screwed up. Bun is one of them. Also, Spice One, Tupac, Devin. He never really got to very much Devin, obviously, because of when he died and when Devin came out. Like, I mean, Devin's been around since, like, 94. Like, that's when the Odd Squad album dropped. But there isn't, like, there's only, like, a very small handful of Devin songs on screw tapes. Sadly.
I feel like what this album does is, like, there are just tracks on here that are just some of my favorite songs, period, and will always have endless replay value for me. Like Reckless, After I Die, which I've said a few times is like the sound of, like, a muggy summer night. It just really feels so languid. It's like 9 minutes or something, and that, like, mournful kind of horn in the background, I love that. Tell Me Something Good, Inside Looking Out, My Mind Went Blank. Like, those are just 3, like, perfect songs in a row. And I don't know what the sound is on Tell Me Something Good, if you guys know what I'm talking about, like that sound in the background that, like, comes in every, like, couple of, like, seconds, and I wish I knew what was that noise and if it was being altered in any way.
I think one of the things that distinguishes All Screwed Up from a lot of other Screw stuff is that he's a lot more interventionist in terms of adding samples, and, like, I think he even, like, played out little keyboard lines and added them to some of the tracks. I'm not sure about that, but it sounds like it, especially if you listen to the originals. You'll notice that some stuff is just plain missing from them. And yeah, I know what you're talking about with Tell Me Something Good specifically. I don't know exactly what it is. There's a sample. I think the sample is from Moments in Love by Art of Noise. But I think that was in the original.
Yeah, I'm looking right now to see if I can find it on who's sampled, but I don't know. Well, I know it has the Isley Brothers, the Isley Brothers sample. So that might be. What else is in there?
Well, Screw always had a way with, like, he'll get to this on Late Night Fucking Yo Bitch, which he always knew what to do with R&B, and there'll always be little R&B touches even on, like, the hardest tapes. Like, he was really good at blending genres into stuff. Like, most tapes were not just straight one genre sort of things. Like, he
Yeah.
had, and funk especially. Like, one of the things that'll be recurring with him is, like, older synth funk stuff showing up.
Yeah. He has an amazing tape of just synth funk stuff, which is old school.
Yeah.
But yeah, like even sticking to how he handles like soul and R&B on All Screwed Up, like in Pregnant Pussy by UGK, which is actually my favorite UGK version on All Screwed Up, and I'll explain why. But first, that little bit in the chorus where like a ridiculously syrupy voice goes, "Loving you every day." You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not on the original at all. Screw added that, and it was an absolutely perfect choice. Or like in Inside Looking Out, that voice that goes, sitting in the Harris County Jail. That
Yeah. It's
was also,
so. That was
yeah,
he added that too.
yeah. And I don't know, to me, like, the Harris County Jail, because of that song, is like a state of mind for me.
I've never even seen a picture of the Harris County Jail, so
Yeah.
Now, you don't,
I don't. I imagine it's there. Houston is in Harris County. And there's. And I like a lot of like the little local references too, like in Reckless, where Point Blank is like telling this whole story with this like a lot of geographical detail. Like took a left turn on Selinsky, thought maybe I'd kill his bitch ass in back of Frost Elementary, which I don't know. I think that sense of odd detail is something that comes up a lot in Southern rap and Houston rap in particular. Um, Probably kind of an outgrowth of like the regionalism of it, but it's just I don't know. I really like that Point Blank really wanted to tell us that he was planning on killing somebody in back of an elementary school.
I mean, it's good to have goals. It's also good to be specific about what you want.
And I wanted to say, sorry.
No, I was going to say that's something that's most charming about older rap music is the sense of time and place that I think gets lost. Everything tries to go for streaming dollars, where you just lose that sort of character. And screw tapes are full of that because some of them are made specifically for people. Like I know, like some of them are presents. I don't know if any of them are just like were any of them like pay deals where somebody paid him to make a tape for them. I'm sure they were.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know for sure, but he definitely made tapes just for friends, often for their birthdays. Like birthday tapes and funeral tapes were both big with him. And I know he started charging like $10 a tape pretty early on in his career. So I'm sure like someone was like, yeah, I'll give you 15 if you throw on a couple of songs that I like.
I mean, there were definitely tracks of his that showed up on like repeat tapes, and you got to wonder if they were his personal favorites or just people wanted to hear those same songs over and over.
Yeah. What's interesting though is that like he only did big anthems for the most, like big rap anthems. I think for the most part early on in his early tapes, like on 3 in the Morning Part 1, which I think he made in like 91 or 92. He had like a lot of the big like G-funk tunes. Like he had Fuck with Dre Day and It Was a Good Day and stuff like that. But on later tapes you don't really hear that. You don't really hear like the biggest tunes. You hear like artists like Tupac and stuff, but you don't necessarily hear like I don't think you could combine. I don't think you could compile a best of G-funk from screw tapes.
The early one,
I guess this is my my chance to plug. I forget. I'm doing a bad job of this because now I forget what tape it was on. But I was listening to one of the tapes yesterday, and it was the one that had "Ain't No Fun" on it. Which, full disclosure, "Ain't No Fun" is a song that I love, despite being absurdly problematic.
about it.
Yeah. But the way that like Screw did it, it makes the song sound like warmer, but also like simultaneously like filthier. Like the song sounds better
Mm-hmm.
in like the spin that he put on it. And I'm doing a bad job of describing like that kind of feeling that it gives you, but like slowed down and with his alterations, like it feels more like I'm driving around with Snoop Dogg and on a day in California in like '93.
Which may or may not be a terrifying experience in
Yeah.
Screw's hands. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I would add Snoop Dogg to the list of people who sound like they were made for Screw tapes.
Snoop Dogg's voice was made for most things, actually.
It's
And
true. It's true.
I feel like it's unfortunate that Snoop Dogg has done some dumb shit, but by the standards of rapper dumb shit / celebrity dumb shit and / rappers making bad albums late in their career, I think Snoop Dogg mostly deserves a pass. I think
Yeah.
he's better than Dre. I think he has a much better catalog than 75% of rappers. I think he takes more artistic chances than most old rappers for sure.
Mhm.
Like, does he like come up with ways to flog people for money? Absolutely. I don't think he tries to hide that.
Mm-hmm.
Snoop Dogg is like the cool rap like uncle in a sense, and he's just like he's the kind of guy where a lot of the younger like rappers like look up to.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Wayne is kind of transitioning into that role these days, but I feel like Snoop Dogg on the West Coast, like obviously, like someone like Kendrick was big into Snoop Dogg. Anyone on TDE, I'm sure J Rock listened to 800 Snoop Dogg albums back in the day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and like I think Snoop Dogg is like when he was good, he was such an archetypal rapper. Like if I wanted to say this is what a rapper sounds like to somebody who'd somehow never heard rap music before, Snoop Dogg is one of the first people I'd point to.
yeah, just like he's got a great rap voice
Yeah.
and like delivery, like everything is so smooth. Like his verse on "Nothing But a G Thing" is like the archetypal rap verse.
Yeah. Um yeah, that smoothness and that like I don't know, that way he can carry the rhythm of his rapping without any sense of hesitation or pausing. It's brilliant, and it works really well on screw tapes where flow is so important. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think. I cut Patrick off again. Go.
I was just going to blandly agree, but also say that, well, one of the things about Screw is that he makes good rappers better and boring rappers interesting.
yes. And I wanted to make a point about on All Screwed Up. What it does for Point Blank is incredible. I don't know if y'all have ever listened to Point Blank's like just his regular tunes or like the
Yeah,
versions of.
I've heard.
I
I've heard too the "Prone to Bad Dreams" record.
I
yeah.
haven't thing, so I'm completely in the dark.
I don't know about you, Caleb, but I think that Point Blank is far more interesting than he is good. Like, I think he
Yeah.
comes up with good. Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say like I think him on Screw gives his voice and like what he's saying like has a whole different tone to it, and like I feel like my mind the reason why like my mind went blank is such a quotable song, but if you
Mm-hmm.
listen to the original, like it's still a good song to me, but it's just like it goes from being good to amazing
Yeah,
on in Screw's hands.
and I think that in that's a case of Screw like not just changing an artist, but bringing out a potential that they didn't have on their own. Like I think what Point Blank was trying to do, he was only able to do it in Screw's hands. Like yeah, my mind went blank, and I think also After I Die,
Hmm.
like it
Mm-hmm.
sounds so
Yeah, definitely.
dinky in the original version. So yeah, one thing I love about Point Blank, and some people make fun of him for this, is like his ability to be really, really bleak, but at the
Yeah.
same time have this kind of I would call it a kind of emotional energy, but also at the same time this tremendous nihilism. Like I love the nihilism of his lyrics. That was one of my favorite things about After I Die. Which you're right, Caleb. But like it does sound like wandering through a murky big city at night. I kind of associate it, especially the horns, with like film noir and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and like that kind of sense of like having this brooding existential storm inside of you as you go wandering around some big city. And I think Point Blank can imply that with his lyrics, but he can't really pull it off when he's rapping. And Screw's the one who makes the sound come through.
Yeah, that bleakness is more. The bleakness is given a backdrop that, like, suits it better.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, it's just that refrain, because a lot of times in that song, like, that refrain will repeat itself, like the After I Die refrain. And
Yeah.
it's just like, and it's just like him describing, like, things that are going to happen, like,
Yeah.
after, which is, I mean, very bleak on its surface, and it needs to be given a backdrop that, like I said, that, like, reflects that and can make it musically interesting enough for a 9-minute song. And it's more than that. Like, it's outside of those 3 songs in a row, like those tracks 7 to 9, that After I Die is right there with them as one of my favorites on the tape.
Yeah. And you talk about how quotable he is. I have to like I think my favorite moment in After I Die, because it's so quintessentially Point Blank, and also just quintessentially what Screw can do to a good line, is my son don't know about the tragic. They're just he's just crying because they won't let him play in my casket. Like,
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
yeah,
yeah,
it takes a certain kind of rapper to come up with that. Like, I think Point Blank, he had some real issues. I'm guessing, and it's almost a kindness on Screw's part that he kind of made it possible for that very unique darkness in Point Blank to shine through. Shining
Well, I think
darkness.
one of the more appealing things about Screw's music is that he's able to find a balance between party music and like nihilism, like active nihilism, and mournful introspective music. And that comes through a lot in like not just the obvious influences, but stuff like that would obviously call him an influence, like ASAP, Odd Future, Raider Clan, anything emo rap. Like there's like all of this really has Screw in its DNA in
Yeah.
terms of sort of nihilism, in terms of that willingness to confront it, in terms of even the sonic palettes it uses to express those emotions. And it all kind of starts with releases like this, which are using sometimes songs that don't even know that they're expressing these emotions, and
Mm-hmm.
Screws bring it out of them.
Yeah.
yeah.
Other
Clams Casino definitely listened to this, like, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say too that like Screw. One thing is that so many people take away different things from Screw, but Screw is amazing at balancing them. Like, on All Screwed Up, he creates this dreamy psychedelic soundscape that also bangs as a rap album, I think.
Oh
Like,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, though, like, My Mind Went Blank, like, is a really hard song, and to the
yeah,
point of, like, quotability. I mean, my favorite line is the all the big boys play with all my Tonka toys, like that one is great. And Reckless, when he's like, Reckless Clan, South Park Coalition is a Reckless Clan. Yeah.
yeah. On My Mind Went Blank, which might be my favorite song on All Screwed Up. I'm not sure. First of all, I love how hard the drums are when
Yeah.
when the song just starts before and then when the sample comes in, it's like ice melting inside you. That's the only way I can describe it.
It
Um,
definitely has like a cold feeling.
yeah, and oh, I have to say my favorite lines from My Mind Went Blank are either robbing everybody, hell, I might have robbed you. Or I'm here to let you know that it ain't all good. Sorry, here to let you know that it ain't all good, which are both, yeah, they're like, that's what Point Blank does. Like, he can be funny, but it's always funny in this really confrontational, morbid way.
Yeah, it's not like conventionally funny. It's
Yeah.
it's funny that kind of makes you do almost a double take that you're like nodding along to these lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, really have
Speaking
nothing
of,
much. No, go ahead. No, I'm sorry. I was about
oh
to say
no,
I have nothing much, so I shouldn't add anything. That would be dumb for me to cut somebody off saying I have nothing much to add.
okay, well, I'll say, speaking of nodding your head and nodding your head along and doing a double take at what you're listening to, I think the version of Pregnant Pussy on All Screwed Up is just fucking incredible in that respect.
Yeah, for
Because
sure, yeah.
it's so, I mean, I would say it's a beautiful rap song.
Hmm.
You can hear, yeah, I mean, you can hear them, really going at it down under all those layered synths and samples. And the drums are going, and it's just total head nod headphone rap. Um, Such that you can choose to not pay attention to the lyrics, but even when you do, somehow that, they're just trying to be edgy at that point in the original, but it's actually, it sounds cool. Not
Kind
not
of when it
not the
comes to Pimp.
sentiment, but
I was gonna say I'm kind of a hypocrite when it comes to Pimp C lyrics, and then I give him a lot of rope that I don't give other rappers because he's so charismatic, which makes me kind of a hypocritical asshole. Because he has some really unforgivable lines throughout his career, like, but still,
yeah.
his
Um,
presence is really
oh,
good.
see, I see exactly what you mean about that with Pimp C and Bun B. I think that "Tell Me Something Good" has some of the best lyrics in any rap song I've ever heard. They're kind of morally unconscionable. They sound like assholes, and they are trying to be assholes. But in terms of how the lyrics are worded and structured, and how like the different parts of this very long disc come together it into like a total destruction of whoever they were talking about, yeah, I think it's pretty brilliant.
I mean, you can never go at Bun as a technical rapper. Pimp had his limitations, although I think he was underrated. I never thought Pimp was a bad rapper at any point. Even when I had a southern bias, I'd listen to him, and he was never somebody. Although at some point, I did think Ludacris was a bad rapper, and that is the dumbest opinion I ever had as a child. Bad rapper.
Yeah, I
He's
think
just talking. He's just telling jokes was something that 14-year-old Patrick actually thought at one point.
Well, no, I mean, I think it was common enough to think that about pop rap at some point.
yeah, I think like the one thing that look, I think that the discourse in the late 2010s around music is kind of exhausting sometimes, but one thing that I actually do like is the discourse even amongst like, nerds essentially. Um and I am grouping all of us into that, but
Yeah.
I think it's like I'm glad that it's become very like commonplace or acceptable to be like, oh yeah, like this popular rap is good. Like the Southern hip hop like resurgence in internet circles, I think ultimately is a good thing, even if some people might like complain about it or whatever. Like I think like Southern hip hop's amazing, and I think when it comes to people like that weren't originally appreciated as much by like people just getting into hip hop, 10, 15 years ago as opposed to now. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's great that, quote unquote real rap heads can also be like, will also be like, oh, DJ Screw's amazing and UGK is great and et cetera, down the line.
Yeah, I think rap discourse is way less dogmatic now than it has
Yeah.
ever been. Like there's no requirement to like take a hard line stance. And like I remember when Eminem first broke out, and like everyone was required to have an opinion on him. And you could have whatever opinion you wanted to, as long as it was strong and as long as you didn't change it.
I think I as someone who has changed opinions, well, I don't know if it changed dramatically, but has changed like gradually over time on some things. Like I think changing opinions is like the most important part of like actually listening to music. So it's
Yeah.
funny that you say that, because like I guess speaking to your point about like it being less like dogmatic, I think forum culture is could be a big reason for that, in the sense where there's like the accessibility is like so much now. You could say, hey, I love listening to, I don't know, like I love listening to niche late 90s Cash Money rapper, but I also like listening to Wu-Tang Clan. Like there's no real like scene posturing or stuff like that.
Yeah.
No,
So, yeah.
I had a point and I completely forgot it. That's great. God damn it! I actually had something important. Well, not important.
Well,
But,
you were coming out of it as someone who got into Southern hip hop after other scenes. I don't know if that relates to your point, but just
no, this makes me mad because I actually like it was. You were it was something you were talking about, and then you started changing what you were talking about a little. Because I was moving my tablet while you were talking, and I was not entirely listening to what you were talking.
I was talking about changing opinions over time on things.
Oh yeah. My profound point was that changing opinions is not. It's also one of the most important parts of being a human being. Like you were talking about the Eminem thing, and that you're like that was what Lucy was talking about, and that you're supposed to have like a very strong opinion no matter what. Like you could have any opinion you wanted as long as it was very strong and it didn't change. I feel like that's true of a lot of things now more than ever, but you should always be able to change your opinion on things. And for example, my opinion on Eminem started somewhere at neutral and moved a little bit towards good, and then went down and down, further down.
Yeah, I think a lot of like changing your opinions just has to do with like your headspace as like the years go by. There was definitely stuff like there's definitely stuff that I would have held in higher regard years ago that I don't anymore, or vice versa. And there's also just things you have to get used to. Like I think when a good example of this is when like a new genre or like subgenre pops up, and there's a rush to talk about it, and then like the years go by and it just becomes like any other genre. Then I think like changing opinions on some of the stuff in that, or listening to more stuff from that genre or subgenre, is like is something that like I'm doing a bad job of explaining this, but something that could be like productive, because I think you're seeing it a lot now with popular opinions on like cloud rap and things of that nature, where I don't think some people didn't know how to make heads or tails of it, 8 years ago. And now, because it's a lot bigger, and it's like the foundation for like this generation of internet rap, in a sense, like you've seen popular opinion or shift on it. And I think it can connect back to Screw, because like I was saying earlier, I think Screw was like a foundational, it wasn't just him, but I think he was foundational for a lot of like internet rap scenes.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think, I don't know. I mean, I think that the now accepted kind of cycle of hype and then dying down has kind of taught us how to be flexible in terms of appreciation of scenes and genres. Like, like when cloud rap was blowing up, and there were all these all this back and forth about, well, little B is actually quite brilliant if you pay attention to him, and no, he's just meme rap, a term that I've seen people use often.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the hype exposes you to it, and then as the hype dies down, you have a chance to reflect on it a little bit and decide, what you think of it, what you thought of it then, and how much you want to explore it.
Yeah, and I think. Oh no, go ahead, Patrick. I'm sorry.
One of the things to go to this argument and relate it to Screw is one of the things about Screw is that, first of all, a lot of us are experiencing his music so far removed from the hype. Like, he wasn't producing it in that vacuum. He was producing it in a completely different environment. But what he was doing was something that was so influential in the way that a lot of people in our more recent media environment were actually getting their music out. Like, the whole putting shit out of your trunk hustle has been romanticized, and that's how so many artists got their shit out. But Screw flooded the market. Like, in the way that, like, internet artists flood the market now. Like, I remember when Currency in 2008 put out, like, a mixtape every month, and that was a big deal. Now you look at somebody's Bandcamp, and they could put out, like, fucking 2 releases every day, and that wouldn't be a huge deal. Look at Buckethead's fucking Bandcamp. Like, seriously. But, like, Screw was doing this shit in the 90s. And thankfully, it's been mostly archived, but how much are we missing? Think about that. Like,
I've read somewhere, like, okay, actually what I've noticed is I've looked into this many times since I got into Screw, and it seems that every year the estimation of how many tapes he made goes up. I now hear, like, multiple thousands of tapes.
Well, I feel like there's always going to be, like, bullshitters who knew. More and more people know him with every passing year. More and more people have a story. So I feel like, I don't know how, like, his estate is controlled. Like, I know that CD releases of Screw tapes started happening, which anybody could do that. They're out there. You can just press CDRs. So I don't really, I have not looked into that at all. I can't speak with any authority on that. But, I mean, as far as the ones that are numbered chapters go, they all seem like, it doesn't seem like anybody is, I'm trying to think of the right way to talk about this in terms of how legitimate the Screw tapes we know are. Like, in terms of what's legitimate and what was put out after his death that isn't something that was a Screw tape.
Yeah, and I have heard that, like, fake Screw tapes would circulate throughout Houston, and Screw himself would get very angry at this.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Well, also at one point in time they had beef with Swishahouse, right?
Yeah.
That was eventually resolved. I remember watching a documentary years ago on the subject, but like Paul Wall was saying how, like, there was beef between the two camps, but he would actually still go to, like, that side of Houston where, like, the Screwed Up Clique would be and hang out with them.
Paul Wall seems like the most likable guy in the world. I don't know how, like, he had beef with Chameleonaire for a while too. Like, they were best friends, but I guess they fell out over something. But Paul Wall seems like, how could you hate him? And I used to hate him when I first got into rap. That was another one of my, like, snobby bias things. Well, Paul Wall is just the dumbest guy in the world. And I don't know how I could think that, because he's actually not a bad rapper either. Like, he actually has some really good, like, technical rap songs.
Yeah. Honestly, I would say it was about, like, the whole screwed up clique, including DJ Screw. They seem like some of the nicest dudes in rap. I don't know if that will make any sense to either of y'all, but I just get that impression.
I agree.
And yeah, like, one thing for me with them, you get this on June 27th, you get this on a lot of the freestyles. I always get the impression of, like, just a bunch of people who really like each other.
Well, one of the things that really appeals to me about these tapes is I went through a period of my life where I spent a lot of time going around with my friends just smoking blunts and freestyling. And you get a lot of that atmosphere on these tapes with the freestyles. And you don't get a whole lot of that recorded, at least in a way that's worth listening to musically. Like, there was the one Lil B, like, my favorite Chance the Rapper project. The only Chance the Rapper album anyone to hear is the one he did with Lil B. And it's just a bunch of dumb based freestyles. And that's something that has the same sort of quality as these freestyles, except these are way better beats. And it's just kind of the quality of just people hanging out and passing off whatever comes off the top of their head, just bullshitting. And it's a great sort of atmosphere. Like you feel like you're in the room while this is happening. And Screw's music, the way he engineers these things. Like I hate to be one of those. I sound like a fucking like vinyl nerd talking about Steely Dan at Guitar Center when I talk about the warmness. But like the pops of the tape hiss or whatever. But it kind of feels like something that translates from listening to this on cassette. Is the warm, the fuzz of the recording.
Yeah.
Really, you feel like you're in the room.
And I find it funny because, I mean, Screw, I think he did all of his mixing from vinyls and then put them on cassette, which I imagine would make a lot of audio files groan. But yeah, the cassette quality is a big part of it. I mean, one thing about Houston is that it's very humid. It's a seaside town, and it's extremely humid. And I always think of that when I hear like the warp and crackle of the tapes. I can feel them kind of sitting there, saturating in the Houston air, and that is a huge part of the atmosphere.
I've only ever been to Dallas in Texas. I've never been I've only been in like the Dallas Fort Worth area, so I don't know how different it is from Houston. The only thing that struck me about Dallas was how flat it was.
Yeah. Dallas and Houston are actually very different places, I think, because Houston is a rather strange place. It's a very large city. I think once I read it was like the fourth biggest city in the US. And there's something very kind of, I don't know, everything in Houston feels mixed up with everything else. Like it's this big labyrinth of concrete just kind of splayed out over a huge space of land. It is also very weirdly flat, and I always notice that because Austin is very hilly. And it's it's very maze-like, and it's very like if you drive or even walk there for 5 minutes, you'll feel like you've gone through so many different places. Um, it has a kind of like when I hear After I Die, for example, it's very easy for me to situate the song and the mood of it in Houston. He's wandering around like I see a bunch of concrete highway ramps crisscrossing with each other, which is something you see a lot in Houston, and like I don't know, just a lot of concrete and a lot of shopping centers and a lot of like and everything is very close to everything else, and you're always lost.
So do you think you kind of like get the architecture and like the vibe of the city from the music?
Yeah. Like I think Houston has a certain dreamy quality because it's very disorienting to be. I mean, I imagine people who live there get used to it, but it's it has itself a kind of a very dreamy, mixed together quality. Um, and the persistent heat and humidity just beating down on you, such that you are always at least a little bit dizzy when you're in Houston. And the way, like, if you just turn down one street, you'll feel like you're in a completely different city from the street you were on to the street you turned onto. And that kind of maze-like quality it has. I think, yeah. I mean, when I first started listening to Screw, especially when I started listening to All Screwed Up, like, I always imagined Houston. I always felt like I was kind of floating over or through Houston.
Now, it's interesting you would talk about how it has such a unique sense of place, which I agree with, because he pulls from so many other different regional scenes. Would you say Screw takes everything and makes it Houston, or he is able to invoke other regions as well? Because he takes a lot of West Coast and Bay Area specifically, E40, Spice One.
Yeah. I think that the unity of the feeling of a Screw tape is one of the most amazing things about him. I mean, it's usually West Coast or Southern, But he can jump back and forth between those places, and you feel like you're in the same space the whole time. Um, I mean, part of it, I guess, is because I think he made the tapes in real time, right? Like he just stood there and stood there playing through the records and mixing everything up, without like stopping or editing things together later. And so you have the sense of it all happening, of it being one moment in his life in a fixed place and in a fixed atmosphere. And yeah, that has a way of kind of bringing the the geographical breadth of his of the tunes he chooses together. Now, I haven't been to California. I've never been to California actually, so I don't know if there's any similarity between the kind of visual and aesthetic quality of like LA versus Houston. But yeah.
I mean, I was in California for a few weeks a couple years ago. Kind of started in Northern California, drove down the coastline, just like it was a family trip, made our way through California, ended up in Southern California. And I mean, like I said, I haven't been to Houston, so I can't compare, but I think one thing that struck me about it is how drastically different the state is the more you go like from like north to south. The Northern California is very, I'm trying to think of the word, but it's more, it has more of a like natural, like nature kind of aesthetic. I mean, out once you get out of San Francisco, it has more of like a small time aesthetic. There's obviously, you go through some of these like smaller cities and there's like a sense of like community there. You get the sense that there's like a lot of people that have lived there for a long time. And then Southern California is just like the same, I guess, but also the opposite in that it's very, I mean, I love Southern California, so this is not, there are no shots at LA here. I thought LA was great, but only doing like 5 or 6 days in LA was cool because there was like so much of it. And I feel like similar, because I mean, I live within like about 45 minutes from Manhattan, New York City. So I guess it's a good comparison point, but it felt simultaneously more and less vast than New York City. Like, if that makes any sense, where it feels more vast, I guess, because the public transit is bad and like there's not, you have to drive everywhere and there's traffic and it just feels more open. But it also felt less vast because I do think there was more like there still was like that sense of community at some point. I mean, you probably lose that once you go into like freaking, Calabasas or something. But in actual like Metro LA, there still felt like, despite all of the tourism and Hollywood, etc., there still was like, it still felt like uniquely its own town. But I've never lived there, so I can't speak to how it was.
That description of LA actually does square with Houston, as I've seen it. With that kind of sprawling quality, not a lot of skyscrapers, just this sense of bigness. And yeah, you have to drive everywhere. There's really not much in the way of public transportation. And yeah, one thing I've noticed that Houston has is it has like a lot of, sort of well-known neighborhood eccentrics. Like
Mm-hmm.
in every sort of area of Houston, there will be one or two characters and everybody kind of knows. So it has that lived-in feeling.
And you could, definitely add Screw and the Screwed Up Click to those eccentrics.
Well, I was gonna say, we were talking about how he is able to invoke like regional scenes or whatever, and I was looking at, there's no better way to talk about that than his Pac versus Biggie tape, and I look on RYM and it's listed as a bootleg, which makes me think that he never put out a Pac versus Biggie tape. Somebody just compiled all of his Pac and Biggie songs and put them on shuffle. Either way, this was the first Screw tape I actually really got into. And I think probably the first one I heard on Soulseek. So even though it wasn't his, like I was talking about fake screw tapes, and the first screw tape I really liked was a fake screw tape.
No, but I like the Pac versus Biggie tape. I don't think Screw assembled it, but I think that they are his mixes.
Yes, no, I think they're all genuine Screw songs. I really love Me and My Girlfriend on this. The closer is some of the best chops he's ever done. One of the things about modern Screw producers, and I think I've said this in the past, is that the reason we have the whole slowed and reverb movement on YouTube is that you have people who like chopped and screwed music but hate chops. So you just get slowed and reverbed, where they just want music slowed down. And they don't want like annoying DJs and chops, so they just want somebody to just make their music slower, and they're too lazy to do it themselves. Yeah, I feel like the selection on this is kind of skewed in Biggie's favor, so it's a testament to how good Tupac sounds as over Screwed treatment. That it sounds pretty even. Excuse me. In terms of like, if you think about it as like a competition, I think it's pretty even. Like, you get both of the big diss songs on. Well, no, do you? You get Who Shot You, and yeah, I don't think you get
No, you don't. You just get Who Shot You.
So it's not really entirely even at all. Oh yeah, you get Hit 'Em Up, right? Yeah, you get Hit 'Em Up.
Oh, you hit him up. I glossed over the track list. You do get Hit 'Em Up.
Yeah, and Hit 'Em Up, that's been on a bunch of Screw tapes. I don't know how many Who Shot You's been on, but Hit 'Em Up was a staple of Screw tapes. One of the ones we're going to talk about later, actually. So.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Pac versus Biggie is, honestly, I think Tupac comes off sounding like kind of an asshole.
Well, he is
in his music.
Sorry, they're both kind of assholes, honestly. But...
Yeah. I mean, but like, I think like the Tupac songs are the ones that stress the beef more than the Biggie songs. Like, I think a lot of Biggie's just like party feel good songs are on that one.
Hypnotizer, Big Papa really have to do. It's like you have Biggie wanting to drink and smoke and chill, and Pac is like just poking at him and yelling. Like, I see what you're saying. Like, if you're comparing the two, it's definitely like Pac comes across like the aggressor, like a dick.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like that just comes with the fact that Pac's some of his most famous songs were the diss songs, whereas Biggie's most famous songs were, the Big Papas, the Juicies of the world, like the rags to riches, smooth, like party, anthems. And for the record, Juicy sounds, for one, amazing on this. Secondly, there's a tape which I know you're not a fan of, Lucy, but Ride and Dirty, chapter 182, which has a 2-minute bit in it where Pimp C freestyles over the Juicy beat with the Screw treatment, and it's pretty great. So there is that part in it. Tape's too long, though. It's like 100 minutes.
Yeah, I'll have to revisit Riding Dirty. Actually, I feel strange for not liking it. I mean, like, Screw's tape with UGK, that has to be awesome. But I don't know. My problem with it was it didn't sound. It sounded more like a UGK freestyle session than a Screw tape. But a UGK freestyle session would be awesome anyway. So I have no reason to complain.
Yeah, it's kind of, it gets a little exhausting, but as someone that like loves everyone involved, it was still a good listen for sure.
Yeah. And yet the thing about Pac and Biggie, like, I always grew up being like hearing Pac talked about as if he were some kind of like reformed saint or something like that. Like, he was like the guy who thought really deep about all of these harsh realities, and he wanted to, like, when I hear about Pac, like, I hear people talking about like Dear Mama and Keep Your Head Up and stuff like that. And that's part of him, but it's always funny to hear, like, especially the Pac songs that usually end up on Screw tapes are a lot of, his more aggressive side. And yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't. I mean, Dear Mama shown up on some, I believe, but he definitely prefers the more, because Screw definitely has a taste for a lot more of the militant sort of rap. Like, he'll throw in a lot of angry, politicized rap, and I think that was the side of Pac that he preferred. I think Bomb, just speaking to that, Bomb First on here is outstanding. And the aggressive Pac delivery and Ambitions as a Rida really works well presented this way, which you wouldn't necessarily think that something with a fast Pac flow would work well slowed down, but it really just kind of, it doesn't stilt his flow. It just gives heft to the quality of his voice. Like he's still, like, it doesn't slow him down. I don't know how to say it any better than that. It just makes him sound even more menacing. And Biggie doesn't need any help either. But I wouldn't say Biggie's in my top list of people. Like I'm okay with there not being too much more Biggie chopped and screwed than there is than here. Honestly, like it's cool, but like somebody like E40, I think Screw does a lot more interesting stuff with his voice than Biggie's. Biggie's voice, he just kind of does basic stuff with. You don't need to do any more with it. Biggie's voice is a character on its own. And I don't think, and the song, like, Things Done Change sounds really cool, like, and obviously Juicy, but more Juicy is more for obviously the way the sample sounds this way. Again, screwing samples. It's incredible. It becomes haunting as opposed to celebratory, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are definitely those rappers who really don't need much from Screw, and who, who can't stand to gain much by him. They might sound a little cooler, but Biggie, like, what I would say about Biggie is that he already kind of sounds chopped and screwed. He has that really deep voice, those lush beats. Like, you don't need to do much more with that. But Pac, he definitely benefits from the Screw treatment. I think Screw is wise to kind of prefer him in his tapes. I really like the version of Ambitions as a Rider. There's also a different version of Ambitions on a Rider. It's on Ambitions as a Rider. It's on a tape called Still a G at 27.
Yeah, I downloaded that. I don't have to listen to it though, but I downloaded that on your recommendation. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Give that one a listen, because like what Screw does to Ambitions on a Rider on that version is amazing. Because for one thing, the track before it on the tape was Missy Elliott's I Can't Stand the Rain.
Yeah, I was gonna say I listened to that yesterday. I was like, it was jogging my memory. That was the tape that had the Miles Davis at the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait, so I heard that Miles Davis is like 7 minutes of freestyles over the Miles Davis thing. And I was like, oh shit, he's gonna do an instrumental Miles Davis thing. It's like 7 minutes of like shout outs and freestyles over Miles Davis. I'm like, I love this beat. I wish people weren't rapping over it. Because normally I through freestyles, but I really like that beat. And I like when he lets a beat ride out sometimes. Like when you actually those instrumentals. And he never did like a jazz thing. And it was kind of like I was a little disappointed that everybody talked over that. So I have actually heard most of that one. I got the names mixed up. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's cool. And yeah, I know what you mean. Like, Screw is usually very good about like when he knows that he's like just put a beat in the perfect place, he'll loop it for a few bars. He does that in a lot of my favorite tracks. Like when I get a new Screw tape, the first thing I look for is like the songs that are 12 minutes or longer. Because I know that I'm going to get that great, like, atmospheric beat mongering in there. And, yeah, I love it when he does that. And it is a shame about that one. Because, just straight up screwed Miles Davis would be really cool. But, yeah, the version of Ambitions on a Rider on that... Ambitions of a Rider on that tape, it comes after I Can't Stand the Rain. And what Screw does is he keeps the beat... Like, he keeps a few bars from I Can't Stand the Rain on a loop, playing simultaneously with Ambitions as a Rider the whole way through. So it sounds like Tupac is rapping over a combination of like the beat to Ambitions as a Rider and that wonderful spectral nocturnal laid back beat to I Can't Stand the Rain. And like the pair of beats together, they almost become indistinguishable from each other, and it becomes this wonderful like soup of sounds. You cannot make out a word that Tupac is saying, but you can hear his cool coming through. And he's just
like a Playboy Cardi verse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's DJ Screw and Yeah. I would love to see a Pierre Bourne interview talking about DJ Screw.
Damn, son, where would you get that?
Where did you find real trap shit? Yeah, that was the tape that had the really the Bone Thugs We Party All the Time
Oh
on it,
yeah,
which is a great track.
yeah, I love that one. I love I love Bone Thugs in general. They're so, I don't know. They just seem so sweet. Like the actual words in their tracks are significantly less sweet than the way they sound when they rap, which I've always found hilarious. But I don't know, I like them. Like I like how they can. They are definitely rapping, but it sounds more melodic than any other rapping I've ever heard in my life.
Well, I feel like Bone Thugs were the biggest influence ever on Migos, and I feel like Migos are probably this generation's Bone Thugs. I don't know how I feel about that.
You don't think that like 3-6 was a bigger influence on Migos? Because I think Lord Infamous's flow is more like the Migos like staccato triplet flow than the Bone Thugs. I think the Bone Thugs has more.
You don't
I mean,
think the Crazy Bone flow was more of an influence on the Quavo triplets than?
I don't know. I feel like I can hear like Takeoff, and I hear Lord Infamous. I mean, it's very it's.
Well, I
I
don't
mean,
really.
they came out around the same time, like both of them, and I don't know if Migos have said anything about 3-6, but I always assume that when people said the Migos flow, quote unquote, like they were, it was really that
I think
flow.
it's, first of all, when we say the Migos flow, we're talking about Versace, like, right?
Right, it's right. So when I hear that, I can hear like Lord Infamous on like Where the Blood At or something.
Okay, when you mention that, I hear it more when you mention that specific song. But
Yeah, I mean, I don't, it's probably splitting hairs. Like there's probably influence from either one, but I think Bone Thugs was always more. It was a little more sing-songy than.
yeah, there's more of an attack idea to the Migos, like they're all coming at the track as opposed to like going with the track.
Because Lord
Which,
Infamous is just talking about dismembering people and getting so high that he can't see the ceiling and like demons coming into his room.
shout out to '90s Memphis and people on RYM who Tommy Wright III would murder and like steal their wallets listening to him on headphones. 5 stars, but.
uh,
Yeah, it's funny because before we went on air, we were talking a little bit about a Bone Thugs and Screw track, and Lucy mentioned she had not heard the Crossroads in the Wild before she listened to Screw. She had not heard Bone Thugs before she listened to Screw, which made me feel super old because I like grew up like in the '90s. That was an inescapable song, and then you had Notorious Thug. Did Screw ever do Notorious Thugs? I think that was probably too late.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure. That might be on a
Probably too. That was like
probably
not
too late.
death, yeah. So, and also I don't know if that would even work, chopped and screwed, because that's like a really like the whole thing about that is a fast song, but
I think slowing things down to a crawl can work in like certain cases, but maybe not at like that speed.
well, yeah, that would just be gimmicky. Like, and you also like does he has at least one thing with Busta on it because like Busta did kind of come out around that time, like. His big mainstream song is Wu Hai Yai On Check, which I'm pretty sure he did one on. But I'm just trying to think of really fast rappers that he slowed down and how that worked.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that like
It was Twisted. Like Twisted was around his tongue twister around that time.
I'm looking right now through like thinking of what he could have. I mean, he does do a lot of stuff with Bone, but I'm trying to see. Most of the rappers are either like mid tempo or they already rap with like a drawl to their voice. I mean, I think
Yeah.
like Bun B in a lot of verses like does have like a little like double time kind of flow, but his voice still has that like twang to it that
It's
Yeah.
interesting to mention the double time thing because I remember from reading the Pimp C autobiography that Bun actually did that on purpose to differentiate himself because he thought that people thought Southern rappers were stupid because they rap too slow. So he had made a point to rap twice as fast when he was right. He wrote his verses in a way where he would have to rap twice as fast to deliver them.
Yeah, I feel like you get that on Murder, where it's just like he's off Riding Dirty, where he's just like in in almost one continuous sentence in a way. He is able to break down through the whole verse, and then he switches up the flow so seamlessly, but it's also there's we talked about this a few weeks ago. We did Freddie Gibbs on Fake Names, where like he switches up the flow so seamlessly, and it's almost like you don't even realize it until he's already on the next flow, like Bun B in this case. Throughout, like if you listen to Murder in that whole verse, which is one of the best verses ever, but when you listen to that whole like breakdown on the verse, and then you realize toward the end that, oh yeah, he's been changing it up this whole time, but it still sounds like it's in the same like tone, pitch, and like it's still very like on beat. Like nothing's really changed. It's just like the vocal like dexterity is crazy.
Yeah. I think actually that's probably one of the most important things about about a rapper sounding good in a Screw tape. Like I could never imagine say old dirty bastard chopped and screwed. Not necessarily because of how fast he goes, but because of like how much he changes the rhythm of his rapping even within a single verse. I think you need a certain consistency in terms of rhythm in order to sound good chopped and screwed.
To your point, I tried. Somebody did Triple X by Danny Brown. An amateur did this, and you could tell first of all, and second of all, it didn't work. Like, and Danny Brown was a lot more like consistent on Triple X than 36 Chambers, the dirty version, but it still didn't work. Like there were certain tracks that worked better than others, like something like Fields, I guess. But still, yeah, you need something.
You think something like Pneumonia would sound good chopped and screwed?
Individual Danny tracks maybe, but overall I think his style, like you need somebody who, there are certain voices I think, I'll put it this way, Killer Mike yes, LP no.
Yeah, that's fair. LP's voice is a lot more abrasive, and Danny Brown's voice, abrasive is probably the first thing that comes to mind.
I'll put it this way, Billy Woods yes, Elucid no.
Well, you would make some people very happy on the website when they can remove.
Those people shouldn't be listening. That guy's banned. You're on the ban list, dude. We got you. We have all cops, all ICE agents, and that guy who said he was going to take fucking Elucid off of the Army Hammer.
And he said he was going to take Killer Mike off all the Run the Jewels albums, right?
No, he sent me RTJ4 without Killer Mike on it. And I asked him to send me Smoking Partners without Corner Boy P on it, and he never responded. I told him to make himself useful. But
he's going to send you UGK albums without Pimp C on it.
That would be qualified as a hate crime, I think.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I would report that. That would be the first time I would report anybody on RYM if he sent me an album without Pimp C on it.